gave Joe Louis the nickname the Brown Bomber. Before Jackie Robinson or Muhammad Ali, there was Joe Louis, a true champion's champion. He was feared for his powerful punches and a string of knockout victories, making him an inspiration to countless people. Many consider him the greatest heavyweight of all time. Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, was born in Alabama in 1914. His parents were sharecroppers, and he grew up in a time when America treated black people unfairly. At the time, around 9 million black Americans lived in the southern states, with most working on farms. Long, grueling days in the fields toughened young Louis. His father was placed in an asylum when Joe was very young, and his mother eventually moved the family to Detroit. At 15, Louis discovered boxing. He won the Golden Gloves and later turned professional. Many don't realize just how active he was as an amateur. He fought more than 50 times, won the Golden Gloves, and found the confidence that so many young people search for. As a professional, he had an unbelievable start, winning 23 fights in his first year, knocking out all but 4 of his opponents. Another good right hand by Louis, another, and down goes Alex. Joe Louis had some of the best balance ever seen in a fighter. His footwork was always on point, and his left hook was devastating days being counted out. Louis was a natural. His punches flowed effortlessly, like breathing. He was a master of his craft. The greatest heavyweight many had ever seen. With each victory, Louis moved closer to the World Heavyweight Championship. His management had a genius strategy: have him fight in his opponents' hometowns. This way, their local fans could witness their fighter take on the mythical Brown Bomber. As a result, Louis set attendance records almost everywhere he fought. I am the king, I am __, and I'm going out to be champion. Flashback to 1935. The confident, young Joe Louis steps into the ring against the experienced and battle-tested Kingfish Levinsky. Louis dominated the division, and he carried himself differently than fighters before him. He didn't gloat, he didn't boast, and he never stood over his fallen opponents. He knew that if he wanted a shot at the title, he had to maintain a certain image. Black fighters were often treated poorly by the press, especially in the 1930s. Boxing writers delighted in coming up with demeaning nicknames for black prospects. There had only been one black heavyweight champion before Louis, Jack Johnson. 2. Just moments before police stepped in to stop the fight, Jack Johnson became the first black heavyweight champion of the world. But white America hated Johnson. He was outspoken, confident, and even had relationships with white women, which outraged many. Because of this, black boxers were denied title shots for the next 29 years. Discrimination was rampant during this time, and it was almost an unspoken rule that another black man wouldn't be allowed near the championship. Even Louis's trainer, Jack Blackburn, was hesitant to coach him. Believing he'd never get a title shot, Blackburn famously told him, "If you want to be champion, you have to be twice as good as everyone else." But Blackburn was a great trainer, and together, they made an incredible team. One of Louis's early challenges was Primo Carnera, a former champion standing 6 feet 7 inches and weighing 270 pounds. He's down from a clean shot. He's being counted out, and that's it. As World War II loomed, Joe Louis became a sensation. The Brown Bomber from Detroit had just defeated Carnera. Louis was never out of position, had knockout power in both hands, and wasted no energy between his punches. Every shot was short, explosive, and precise. For the third time, and the referee stops it. It's over. Joe Louis wins by TKO. Beating Carnera, a fighter associated with Mussolini's Italy, made Louis a national hero. At the time, he was the only black man appearing in newspapers for something other than crime. Joe Louis was respected by everyone. He was loved. He was an idol for black America. Proof that given a fair chance, they could succeed. Whenever he fought, the streets were empty, and the second the fight ended, people flooded out to celebrate, imagining every punch as if they had seen it firsthand. Max Baer was considered one of the hardest punchers in boxing history. He was a former champion, experienced and dangerous. I'm not making any predictions, but I'll knock him out as soon as I can. During the Great Depression, the Lewis versus Bear fight sold out Yankee Stadium, bringing in the first million-dollar gate in over a decade. That fight changed boxing forever. There was a time when punches came out of nowhere and the opponent just collapsed. That's when boxing became a science. Joe Louis was a master of movement, always efficient, never wasting energy. Bear is down from a right to the chin. Look at that slow motion fall. Louis was one of the greatest finishers in history. If he hurt you, he got you out of there. There were no second chances. Louis knocked Bear down 4 times in 4 rounds, winning by knockout in the 4th. Despite his success, many still refused to give a black man a shot at the title. He kept fighting, taking on every challenger. Joe Louis wasn't to blame for being that much better than everyone else. His style was devastating. Calm, patient, always in control. He targeted the head, the body, wherever he needed to land with his dominance in the ring and his humility outside of it. Joe Louis became the first black sports superstar. But one last obstacle remained before he could fight for the title. Max Schmeling. Schmeling was a highly skilled veteran. He studied film of Louis, something few fighters had the opportunity to do. From watching Louis, I see something. Schmeling famously said before the fight that he had noticed that when Louis threw his jab, he brought it back too low. It was a minor flaw, but one that could be exploited. Schmeling saw what no one else did. Schmeling was the perfect fighter to take advantage of Louis's mistake. He was a great puncher, accurate and skilled. He knew what he was doing. A thunderous right hand sent Louis to the canvas. Schmeling stops the rise of the Brown Bomber. Louis had won his first 28 fights before Schmeling knocked him out. But now, Schmeling was next in line for a title shot. The irony? Louis had been denied a title shot because he was black, yet Schmeling, viewed as a symbol of Nazi Germany, was feared for a different reason that in the end, a fight was arranged between Louis and champion Jim Braddock. However, Louis had to sign away 10% of his future earnings to Braddock to get the fight. For the first time in 29 years, a black fighter would fight for the heavyweight title. We don't even need to mention his name. Everyone knew it was Max Schmeling. Joe Louis refused to call himself a true champion until he avenged his only defeat. Joe Louis defends his World Heavyweight Championship against the former title holder, Max Schmeling, the only man to ever beat him. Knowing this was the biggest fight of his life, Louis went into intense training. Everyone understood that this wasn't just about boxing. It was about pride, politics, and world affairs. The heavyweight championship meant more than just dominance in the ring. It symbolized global power. At that time, German troops had marched in Austria, calling it a reunification. People saw what Schmeling represented, making this rematch much bigger than just a fight. With the world on edge, World War II looming, and Hitler's twisted vision threatening to take over, this bout took on a new level of importance. The pressure on Louis was unlike anything seen before. Yankee Stadium, New York City, was the perfect battleground. If Louis didn't win, his reputation would be shattered. The world was watching. The stadium was packed. The gate was record-breaking. And even the U.S. president personally called Louis, telling him, "You have to win this one for the good guys." A black fighter carried the hopes of the free world on his shoulders. The radio broadcast drew the largest audience in history. This was America versus Germany, black versus white, divisions that ran deep at the time. It was a historic moment that went beyond sports. This wasn't just about Louis winning a title. It was about standing against the Nazi ideology. Then the bell rang, a crushing right hand exploded on Schmeling's jaw. Louis stepped back, and from the start, Schmeling looked overwhelmed. He knew he was up against something different. He had no answer. Louis demolished him, knocking him out in the first round. It was one of the greatest moments in boxing history. Schmeling fell victim to the Brown Bomber's relentless assault. Some say it was the greatest single event in the history of the sport. Schmeling couldn't get up. It was over. The country erupted in celebration. Joe Louis and fighters like Benny Leonard proved that they mattered, that their people mattered. They inspired millions. Lewis went on to defend his title 25 times, 22 of those by knockout. We interrupt this program to bring you a special news bulletin. 6. The White House has just announced that Japan is attacking military and naval bases on the island of Oahu. FBY 1942. America was deep in World War II, and Joe Louis stepped up. He enlisted in the U.S. Army, saying, "I'm just doing what any real American would do." During the war, Louis fought 96 exhibition bouts around the world, giving over 5 million servicemen a chance to see their champion in action. Boxing didn't stop for World War II, and Louis didn't either. He staged fights not for money, but for his country that he gave away entire purses, donating everything to the Army and Navy Emergency Relief Fund. But this generosity would come back to haunt him later. Madison Square Garden was packed for his fight against Abe Simon, another title defense where he gave away his entire purse. The military recognized his efforts. Private Joe Louis Barrow was fighting for more than just himself. Louis had a heart of gold. Many times, when fellow servicemen lost loved ones, he personally paid for their funerals. That he was more than just a fighter. He was a true patriot, yet, despite all he gave, the IRS later came after him, saying he owed millions in taxes for those very donations. It would be a burden that would follow him for the rest of his life. Father Time is undefeated, and people started wondering how much longer Louis could keep going. The heavyweight title fight between Joe Louis and Jersey Joe Walcott brought out Hollywood's biggest names: Jack Benny, Bob Hope, Joan Blondell, even FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover. IT was the perfect moment for a championship fight. Louis, wearing black trunks, took on Walcott, who wore white. Regardless of the outcome, Louis had already stated that this would be his final fight. Walcott came out strong, knocking Louis down early. The massive crowd at Yankee Stadium was on edge. Walcott had the lead on points. But then Louis found his rhythm. He unleashed a devastating combination, knocking Walcott down for good. The fight was over. In his 25th title defense, Louis showed he was still the champion. That record, 25 title defenses, still stands today after dominating the heavyweight division for 11 years. Joe Louis officially retired, but his troubles weren't over because his donations had been written as checks to him before being signed over to charity. The IRS still demanded he pay taxes on them. Could they have made an exception? Absolutely. But they didn't. After 2 years of retirement, massive financial problems forced Louis back into the ring. Was it the money? An interviewer asked. Louis answered, "Yeah, taxes had a lot to do with it." He returned and won his comeback fight by unanimous decision, but his debt remained. Desperate, he agreed to fight against the rising star, Rocky Marciano. Louis had the height and reach advantage, but Marciano was a powerhouse with an unstoppable right hand. After the fight, Louis would say, "I didn't get hit by a punch. I got hit by a whole library." Marciano was a relentless brawler. His punches were like sledgehammers. In their 1951 bout, he overwhelmed Louis, knocking him out in the 8th round. IT was a passing of the torch, one legend stepping aside for the next, looking back. Even Marciano admitted that watching Louis go out like that made him think about retiring earlier than planned. IT was a heartbreaking end for one of the greatest champions in history. After boxing, Louis tried everything to pay off his debts, even participating in wrestling matches for extra money. He faced insurmountable interest rates, and the IRS never let up. He eventually found a job as a greeter at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, where he lived and worked until his death at age 66. The world mourned his passing. An emotional service was held in his honor. With full military recognition, former champions Jersey Joe Walcott, Joe Frazier, and Muhammad Ali were all there to say goodbye to the man many considered the greatest heavyweight of all time. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with the words, "I have fought the good fight." Joe Louis shattered racial barriers and paved the way for future black athletes. Without Louis, there might not have been a Jackie Robinson, a Sugar Ray Robinson, or a Muhammad Ali with a record 25 title defenses. He became a legend. Joe Louis, the Brown Bomber, will forever be remembered as one of the greatest fighters and one of the most influential figures in sports history. Nobody did it